Hi, I'm Ingo Swann. I'm here under protest.
Well, Ingo was an intensely psychic person who could be characterized as having invented remote viewing in the modern era.
In 1998, Ingo Swann published a book. He claimed the CIA had paid him to view something unidentified existing on the far side of the moon. 8 years later, the CIA confirmed he had worked for them. The documents confirmed Project Stargate, 2 decades long, trained remote viewers, Soviet installations, locations no satellite could reach. Swann's participation confirmed. His accuracy rate confirmed. What the documents do not contain is any account of what he saw there. That part is still classified. On March 8, 2026, the Pentagon released 161 classified files. Swann's Stargate participation is one of them. His moon sessions are not. What he came back with was not good. Before the CIA came for Ingo Swann, the scientists found him first. Swann grew up believing that he had psychic ability. As an adult in the early 1970s, he began volunteering for experiments at the American Society for Psychical Research in New York. Researchers tested him on basic ESP tasks, attempting to influence plants with metal concentration and alter environmental temperature readings. He performed well enough that word spread. One experiment from this period defines what Swann was. A researcher asked him to describe what he saw inside a sealed box. Swann said he saw darkness, nothing. The researcher noted the disappointment and moved to end the session. Swann said, "Wait." He said he saw darkness because the light bulb inside the box had burnt out. The researcher walked over, opened the box, and the bulb was burnt out. That was the experiment that made scientists pay attention. In 1972, physicist Harold Puthoff at the Stanford Research Institute recruited Swann for remote viewing experiments, studying whether consciousness could gather information from physically inaccessible locations. In 1973, Puthoff proposed a specific test, a remote view of Jupiter. Swann resisted. He never wanted to view targets that couldn't be verified. Puthoff told him NASA had probes in transit. Pioneer 10 and 11 would arrive at Jupiter within months. Anything Swann described could be checked. So he agreed. He described a hydrogen atmosphere with rotating cyclone-like storms, high infrared readings, layered cloud colors, ice crystals. Most of these, the researchers noted, could be reasonably deduced by anyone who understood planetary physics. Swann himself described his ability in the simplest terms available. He said, "I am not this body in terms of consciousness. Consciousness can go places where the body cannot." That sentence was his entire theory. It was also his entire claim. Not that he was special. That consciousness itself had a mobility that physics had not yet described. Then Swann described something that could not be deduced, a ring around Jupiter, not visible from Earth, not theorized in any published scientific literature. A ring made of fine dust and small asteroid fragments, he said, thinner than Saturn's and closer to the planet's surface. Pioneer 10 arrived at Jupiter on December 1973. It scanned the planet with every instrument it carried. No ring detected. Pioneer 11 arrived in 1974. Same instruments, same result. No ring. Skeptic Dr. Ray Hyman, a psychologist at the University of Oregon, later commissioned by Congress to review the Stargate program, said coincidental hits were inevitable at the volume of observations made. One accurate prediction among broadly applicable statements proved nothing about psychic ability. Voyager 1 arrived at Jupiter in March of 1979, 6 years after Swann's description. Its cameras found a faint ring no one had known was there, made of dust and small particles, thin, positioned close to the planet, exactly as Swann had described. Pioneer missed it. Pioneer missed it again, but Voyager found it. The ring was there the entire time. The ring had not been there by deduction. It had been there by observation. New Horizons photographed Jupiter's ring again in 2007. The images matched Swann's 1973 description of its composition, position relative to the planet, and comparative thinness against Saturn's more visible ring system. A description made 6 years before the first confirmation and 34 years before the clearest photographic record. The U.S. government had been watching Swann's accuracy rate very carefully, and in March 1975, it was time to make use of it. What they needed him for was something that could not be confirmed by any probe, satellite, or conventional intelligence asset. And whatever they had already found up there, they were not willing to send another human being to look. The 3 a.m. phone call told him nothing except where to go. At noon on the appointed day, Swann stood near the elephant in the central rotunda of the Smithsonian's Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. A man in civilian clothing approached, handed him a card that read, "Do not speak or ask questions," and led him to a waiting car. Inside the car was a second man. The two men, whom Swann would refer to throughout his later account as the twins, handed him a second card. "We need to search you for listening devices." They did, thoroughly. A third card followed. "We would like your help on a project suited to your talents. Are you comfortable in a helicopter?" Now, before Swann could process the information, a bag was placed over his head, and the car began moving in what he felt were deliberate circles, designed to disorient his sense of direction. He was eventually led to a helicopter, flown to an unknown location in or near the D.C. area, and escorted into a building he described as quiet and institutional. When the bag finally came off, he was in an office with a man who introduced himself as Mr. Axelrod, calm, well-dressed, apparently senior. Mr. Axelrod offered him a cigar and made a proposal. His organization needed Swann for a remote viewing project. Payment would be $1,000 per day in cash. Now, in today's value, that approaches $6,000 per day. In exchange, Swann could not leave the facility during the project, could not discuss it with anyone, and could not speak of it publicly for at least 10 years. Well, Swann agreed. The facility was comfortable, but sealed. His own room, gym access, meals provided. He could not leave, make outside contact, or discuss the project with anyone. Continuous surveillance. A sealed world with no outside reference point, run by people he did not know, in service of a mission nobody had named. The following morning, Axelrod told him the target. The moon. No other explanation. Swann was given a list of coordinates and told to begin. Axelrod had not told him what the previous viewers had seen. He had not told him what he thought the organization already knew. What Swann was about to describe would make clear that none of that had been shared because Axelrod did not want Swann's observations contaminated by prior reports. He wanted raw testimony, independent confirmation. Working through the coordinates one by one, Swann described what he saw at each location on the lunar surface. Now, most were unremarkable. Crater rims, rock formations, the expected bareness of an airless surface. But then he reached a set of coordinates that produced something he had not anticipated. Tracks. Long parallel impressions in the surface, running in consistent directions, as though left by heavy equipment moving across the terrain. Not geological formations, not meteor impact patterns. Tracks. He described patterns in the surface dust that looked as though they'd been shaped by wind or air movement. But the moon has no atmosphere. There should be no wind, no air, nothing to disturb the surface dust in directional patterns. He moved to another coordinate set and found a crater filled with a diffused green glow. The light inside it was soft and scattered, not sharp the way direct sunlight is on an airless surface. Diffused light requires a medium to scatter through. Now, on the moon, that medium should not exist. Inside the glowing crater, he described what he interpreted as an airfield. Hangars, roads, even towers. Large machinery distributed across the crater floor and walls. Perfectly circular holes cut into the rock face. The kind of precision that required power drilling equipment, not natural formation. One of the coordinates directed him to a formation that stopped him. A crater shaped exactly like a satellite dish. Not in the impressionistic way that pareidolia works, where humans find familiar shapes in random formations. A dish, a concave bowl with a central spike rising from the floor, exactly as a dish antenna is structured, with additional features around the rim that matched no known geological process for crater formation. Swann described it in his notes as looking like something that was built rather than something that occurred. He moved closer and found structures with windows, domes, a fine mist visible inside them, suggesting pressurization. The same diffused green glow emanated from within. Through the windows, he saw figures. Humanoid, not human. Similar enough in basic proportions that he recognized the category, but not the same. They were moving with purpose inside the structures. Industrial activity. Controlled, focused. Then several of them stopped, turned toward the window, toward him. More turned. Then more. A dozen figures inside a pressurized dome on the far side of the moon, all facing the point in space where Ingo Swann had placed his consciousness. He reported what was happening to Axelrod in real time. "They see me." Axelrod said, "Come back now, firmly. Come back quickly. They're pointing at me. Come back, away from that place." Swann pulled his consciousness back, opened his eyes, looked at Axelrod. He said, "You already knew they were psychic, didn't you?" Axelrod took a breath and said, "The experiment is over." What the beings in the dome had detected was not a camera or a satellite. They had detected a human consciousness observing them from a distance of 238,000 miles, and they had noticed immediately. That single fact changes the nature of every question that follows. If the beings on the far side of the moon can detect a human mind observing them, they know that we are aware of them. They have known since at least 1975, and in the 50 years since, they have not left. On July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. According to accounts referencing private NASA channels, Armstrong switched from the public broadcast to the medical channel and told the chief medical officer, "They're here. They're parked on the side of the crater. They're watching us." No official transcript containing those words has been formally released. What has been formally documented is Buzz Aldrin's description, given in a public interview, of an L-shaped unidentified object observed during transit to the moon, large enough to view through optical equipment. The crew discussed it privately and chose not to report it on an open channel. Apollo 17 astronaut Ronald Evans, in Pursue archived transcripts, described bright angular objects tumbling past the command module in lunar orbit, inconsistent with ice particles or debris. Another crew member compared them to fireworks outside the window. Swann described humanoid beings in pressurized structures. Armstrong described craft watching the landing site. Aldrin described an L-shaped object in transit. Evans described angular objects in orbit. 3 missions, 3 categories, none officially explained. 6 months after leaving Washington, D.C., Ingo Swann was at a grocery store when he saw a woman he could not stop looking at. He described her in detail in his book, in terms that made it clear his attention was entirely captured. What cut through the attraction was something else. A physical sensation he described as electricity running through him, followed by the sudden, irrational conviction that the woman was not human. Then he turned around and saw the twins standing near the end of the aisle. He left the store immediately. That evening, a phone call told him to fly to New York and to be at Grand Central Station the following morning. One of the twins met him there and directed him to a payphone. Axelrod was on the line. Axelrod's questions were rapid. Had Swann seen her before? Was he certain she noticed him? Could she have followed him? He asked each question from multiple angles, the way someone does when testing a witness against a theory they already hold. Finally, Axelrod said only, "Stay away from her. She's dangerous." The most grounded explanation sits in the historical context. The 1970s were the height of what declassified CIA records call a psychic arms race with the Soviet Union. Female operatives trained in surveillance were a documented Soviet intelligence tool. If she was assigned to assess the CIA's most valuable remote viewer, Axelrod's reaction makes exact sense. She would have been more dangerous than any device. A year passed with no contact from Axelrod. Swann had been told that when his remote viewing accuracy rate reached 65%, he should write the number on a piece of paper and leave it on his desk. He reached 65%, wrote the number, and went home. When he returned to his locked office the following morning, the paper was gone. In its place, a thin dusting of powder on the desk surface with 2 words traced onto it: "Expect contact." Axelrod appeared in person days later. He asked if Swann had ever seen a UFO. Then he asked if Swann could get away for 3 or 4 days. The private jet flew north for hours. Swann assumed Alaska. He was given thermal clothing and told to remove all metal. 2 hours of mountain roads ended at the edge of a lake in total darkness, with no development visible in any direction. Axelrod told him before they left the vehicle, "They detect heat, noise, and motion. Be absolutely still and completely silent." The 4 men, Swann, Axelrod, and the 2 twins, sat at the edge of the lake in total darkness for a long time. Fog drifted off the water. Then the fog began to glow. First a neon blue, then what Swann called angry purple. The fog thickened and changed color, and then a craft rose from the lake, triangular in shape, approximately 90 feet wide, a pulsing low hum that he felt in his chest before he heard it with his ears. Beams of light shot outward from it and struck the surrounding terrain. One of the twins shouted in a whisper that they needed to move. A beam struck the area where the 4 men had been sitting. Swann described a sound like a lightning strike. He had to be physically pulled from where he stood because he could not make himself move. As they cleared the tree line, he looked back and saw water from the lake being drawn upward into the craft's underside, a reverse waterfall. Hundreds of gallons rising in a column into the hovering triangle. On the drive back, Swann sat in silence for a long time. Then he told Axelrod what he thought he had seen. He said the craft was a resupply drone. He said the beings on the moon needed water from Earth. He said what they were watching was a mining operation. The moon base required resources that the moon itself could not supply, and Earth's oceans were the nearest accessible source. Well, Axelrod did not confirm this, but he didn't deny it either. He shook Swann's hand at the airport and walked him to a waiting plane. Swann flew home alone. He never saw Axelrod or the twins again. In the 1970s, water ice at the lunar poles was theoretical. Swann's description of beings extracting Earth's water because the moon required external resources was either a remarkably prescient understanding of lunar limitations or something more direct. In 2009, NASA's L-Cross mission deliberately crashed an impactor into the lunar South Pole and confirmed the presence of water ice in the debris plume. If there were inhabitants requiring water, and if the lunar ice supply was insufficient for their operational needs, Earth's surface water was the nearest external source. Swann said they were mining it in the 1970s. Now, if he was right, the operation had been running for at least 5 decades, and nobody in any official capacity has explained what is happening to the water. In 2006, the CIA began releasing Project Stargate files through the Crest archive. The documents confirmed what had previously been dismissed as conspiracy theories. A classified remote viewing program had operated within the U.S. intelligence community from the early 1970s all the way through 1995. That's over 20 years. Multiple millions of dollars in funding. Dozens of trained viewers, hundreds of documented sessions. Ingo Swann's name appears in those documents. His participation is confirmed. His accuracy rate across documented sessions is also confirmed. The sessions include targets in the Soviet Union, the Middle East, and locations the documents describe only by grid coordinate. The moon sessions are not among the documents released. Dr. Ray Hyman reviewed Stargate in 1995 and recommended termination. No actionable intelligence, no scientific evidence. His review closed the program officially. What it did not address was the sessions the reviewers were not shown. Other Stargate remote viewers independently produced moon descriptions matching Swann's accounts without access to his reports. The structural similarities, constructed features, the enclosed atmosphere, and non-human occupants were all flagged as significant in partially redacted internal CIA documents. The Pursue archive confirms Apollo's transcripts referencing unusual objects. NASA's official position on all such transmissions remains stress, equipment interference, or misidentification. The Pursue archive is available at war.gov/UFO. The moon sessions remain classified. Ingo Swann died in February of 2013. He had kept his word, staying silent for the required 10 years before publishing. Penetration was one book among many he wrote. The CIA confirmation arrived in 2006. He did not live to see the Pursue release in 2026. Ingo Swann predicted Jupiter's ring 6 years before Voyager confirmed it. He was paid by the CIA in cash to remote view a location they had already had questions about. The beings he found there noticed him immediately, and the sessions where he reported what he saw are the only ones in the Stargate archive that have never been made public. What do you think he actually saw? And if the moon sessions are still classified in 2026, what does that tell you about what's in them? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.